Hello and welcome to this special panel here at Mobile World Congress 2025, hosted at the Technotree stand here in Hall 6, also featuring a live crowd. We're going to talk about all things to do with telco AI. And we've got an excellent panel in front of us. I'll introduce them briefly from here on. We've got Ricard from DT, we've got Imran from Virgin UAE, we've got Adora from Analysis Mason, Jyoti from Technotree, and Eugenia from Telefonica. So over the next 20 or 30 minutes, we're just going to have a look at the current state of play with AI, which is obviously the sort of dominant theme affecting the whole tech world, but especially telecoms right now. And I think with a special look at some of the more emerging aspects of it, like agentic AI. So I think I'm just going to start. I think agentic AI is quite topical for you, Ricard, because you just had an announcement today. Why don't you just talk about, from DT's point of view, some of the ways in which the current developments in AI are coming into play, in which they're opening up new possibilities.
Yeah, no, but absolutely. And I think the buzzword around agentic AI, if we just weed through this a little bit, it actually means something quite it means that customers now will be able to safely sort of work with different AIs from different companies without sharing their data in between. Like, that's the overarching theme, you could wish. But also it means that we are moving beyond apps in that sense. So many apps will sort of move to the background of the experiences, and instead we'll have a top-level agent, hence agentic AI, that sort of orchestrates and works on your behalf on solving different problems, like solving the problem of where to eat tonight, for instance. If you're in Barcelona, you could ask for the restaurant recommendation in your neighborhood, and then you could ask it to book that restaurant. It probably does two things then. It goes to one service to find the restaurant and another service to actually do the booking. And I have an example here, for instance. So this is a blatant plug for our own AI phone. So for instance, I can already from the top level, from the lock screen, I can ask it.
Just announced today.
Yeah, it was announced today. So I can ask it here, for instance, play Metallica on Spotify.
Metallica on Spotify.
So then it opens up the Spotify player inside of the agent already. So no apps opened, nothing like this happening. But this is maybe a gimmick, you could say that it is, but it's the real thing. It is actually happening. The same goes for booking, maybe creating a booking for a SIM card, maybe something else. You could imagine this being an agent just fetching that and then doing it for you, deploying, getting your eSIM, and then making it available on your phone. So that's sort of the agentic future that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept. It's taking, I suppose, the generative AI concept that we come to know to the next level, where you're handing off more of the heavy lifting to the agentic AI, and you can just get on with listening to Metallica or whatever.
Yeah, listening to Metallica. But it's also an opportunity for us as an industry to be the top-level orchestrator in one way or other, and being a strong part of this agentic framework of the future. It's sort of a way to move away from deep API integrations. You sort of don't need that in one way. You could have a higher level of integration where you have your smart assistant sort of collaborating with other agents instead, and then you can build your own IT stack by yourself without necessarily exposing APIs for every single function.
Okay, that's great. So that's a real sense of how it's being used to improve the lives of end users. I'm just wondering, moving on in terms of telco, the problems that AI solves for the telcos themselves. Imran, could you perhaps give us some thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Virgin Mobile UAE, our mantra is to make mobile better, right? And what do we mean by that is basically doing everything with the customer at the heart of it. So this whole wave of AI, we're trying to make it contextualized. So for example, we're in the midst of developing and launching our contextual AI bot, which basically is going to mean, I think if you remember back in the days, some surveys were done, everybody wanted to interact with a chatbot, not a human being. Now it's the reverse. People don't want to interact with a chatbot just because you've got this generative AI doing generic FAQ bot stuff. So what we're doing is we're trying to bring the context back into the AI bots, where, for example, if you're a customer and you're trying to make a credit card payment and it fails, you're not just and then you try to contact the customer service, the bot should already know why you're calling. your intent should already be known because we have all the data. We know exactly what you were doing in the past in terms of all your online interactions, and then be able to actually give context around why the transaction failed. So number one, identifying your intent, why you called, then actually giving the solution automatically, as opposed to having them answer a bunch of questions before you're left turned into an actual live agent that actually solves the problem. Then we're doing a couple of other things. One we call call center intelligence, right? So which is basically a real-time analysis of the call interaction that's happening in between the customer and the customer, the agent that's serving the customer. And what I mean by that is the AI is actually analyzing the call in real time and doing a sentiment analysis and then assisting the agent in what to say next. If the call is going bad, trying to perhaps assist the agent and nudge them into the right direction before the call ends up being a disaster.
Yeah.
Not only that, if the customer is calling because they're about to disconnect the line because of whatever reason, and the AI suspects a churn, actually creating automated plans to suggest, so dynamic pricing basically, to suggest to the agent to offer the customer so that the customer doesn't end up leaving.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't have to be another call from the retention department going to the customer and doing the same thing. So the two things that we're doing with respect to the call centers alone is number one, having the intelligence around what the sentiment of the customer is, number one, then being able to proactively address those concerns with the customer by doing, ultimately creating a journey end to end from the point of customer interacting with our chatbot, being transferred into the live agent, and then of course having the problem resolved. Of course, ultimately the goal over here is to make the customer service better.
Yeah.
And at Virgin Mobile UAE, the things that we've done so far has given us the lead in the NPS across the region by doing so.
I think all that stuff that where human beings interact with this AI is fascinating. I admit there's a part of me that gets a bit freaked out by it, and I kind of want to deal with a proper human being. But then again, if it gets to such a point, what I really want is the problem solved, isn't it?
Exactly.
And if the problem gets solved just fine, and I can overcome whatever Luddite sort of hesitation I have about interacting with a machine rather than the human being, then I suppose that's fine. But yeah, I can see how quite quickly people will get very frustrated if they think they, as you were describing, that sort of Q&A chatbot pathway. And I guess AI and agentic AI and Gen AI is going to get more and more sophisticated in the social parts of it, where it feels more like you're interacting with a person rather than a machine.
Absolutely. So I'll just add one more comment to it. The best implementation, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, for AI when it comes to chatbots and etc., is for a customer never to notice that they're talking to a chatbot or a person. So for a person like you who would like to interact with a human being, they should never know when the AI bot has transitioned to a human being and vice versa. That transition, I think, is the key.
So why don't I, before I bring up another question, just open it up to anyone further on, just on this topic of how AI is helping, maybe start with you, Eugenio, as you work for a telco as well, how AI is helping telcos. Are there some ways in which Telefónica's implementing it you can tell us about?
Yeah, I think AI, we see AI from two different perspectives. Of course, AI on telco, on how can it help us to gain efficiency, to gain productivity, and definitely to engage in a different manner with our customers, that has been described, but also what is our role as a telco company within the broader AI ecosystem. And I think both roles are critical. So I think as a telco, we have very specific assets that position us well to play in this virtuous cycle. I think everything has been described along the ways, what can we offer our customers. But having the network as well gives us very good data and sensibility around what the problems of our customers could be. So if we embed both these abilities to understand and to contextualize the journey of our customers, together with all the information that the data of the network can provide, I think we can turn that into a virtuous cycle for our customers, definitely.
Okay. And maybe moving to vendor side, could you give us a perspective from TechnoTree?
I take a very different view on this. I think our job as software vendors is to really ease the job of the telcos and the people working within the telco. And I think our focus is on preventative rather than reactive. So it's really about saying, how do we pre-identify all those events that lead to calls coming into the call center? So how do we do call deflection? By having intelligence and AI embedded into our customer journeys, into our business processes, having things like autocorrection, built in, so that call is deflected because you fixed the problem even before the customer knows about it. So the focus is on being proactive, on being preventative, because I think the big thing is that when you talk to telco customer service executives, their biggest issue is 80% of my orders end up as calls in the call center because the orders have not completed. Within the telco, the agent then goes and starts searching through a whole lot of information to see where the call went bad. So today, with intelligence like sensor, a sensor built into the TechnoTree stack, it monitors an order from start to finish. It's able to look at where an order could go wrong. It's built to prevent the order from failing through retrying and resubmitting, etc. So I think big focus is on, why do you want a customer to call an agent or a call center? If you can prevent those calls from happening. So I think I'm seeing in many markets a huge focus on call deflection and how that can save. The second area I think that is quite critical in terms of a return on AI is really in terms of how do you improve the productivity of your own skill sets within the organization using AI. So having AI agents that are supporting your staff as opposed to supporting your customers. So, assisting an agent through a customer journey in terms of upselling a product, or assisting a back office IT staff member in designing a solution. So I think AI has a number of uses, both for internal productivity and from a customer perspective. From a customer, it's on productivity and its efficiency and revenue. Internally, it's all about productivity, faster time to market, etc. So I believe that these are the emerging cases that are coming in. And I think that, as these mature, I think you will see telcos becoming truly agile and truly digital.
Just to maybe add to that, actually, we have very good proof points of exactly this, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. So we have something called AskT, which is I can use it, anybody can use it for our entire knowledge base of whatever, we have so many documents everywhere. It's literally flying off the shelves for our customer service agents. We have 40,000 service agents just in Germany, and they love this. They absolutely love it. Their efficiency goes up, their productivity goes up. They don't have to search for things anymore. It's really proactive and working, and it's not that hard of a solution. It's just you make custom queries and you make these kind of things, but it's basically built on top of ChatGPT, if you wish, but for internal data. So that it's these kind of things are perfect proof points, I think.
Yeah, I was going to extend that to you, Dora, from an analyst point of view. What are the kind of things that you're having conversations about to do with AI and telecoms?
So in terms of our research, to date, we've been tracking what operators have been doing with AI, and we've been tracking that, up to from 2019 to date. We've got about over 500 entries around the types of use cases, which we've kind of brought down into 4 categories, right? The customer side of things, which we've been speaking a lot about, how you support the customer, not just how you support the customer, but how you make sure that the customer gets the type of service that they need, and also making sure that the experience they get end to end is effective and satisfying. And then you look at the network side of things, where they're also using AI to be a lot more proactive, a lot more efficient in the way that they manage the network. It's no news that the network is getting a lot more complex, and AI is very effective in simplifying how you manage that network, but also how you marry those two domains, the customer and the network domain. Because when you think of the customer experience, you're thinking of it end to end, the customer journey, but also how the network impacts on that journey as well. So we're looking at it from that point of view. And I think what is also interesting and worth noting is the value that AI brings to enriching the services, the direct end consumer services that the customers get. So there's been a lot, I think, in what the example you gave with being able to use natural language to interact with a device that is running multiple services is really impactful, because in that sense, you take away a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot sort of challenge that a customer would have in terms of accessing multiple services. And that we are seeing with a number of other operators as well, using the concept of the super app to bring together the different services that a telco delivers to their customer to provide a more unified experience to them. And then finally, yes, you can use AI to enrich your operations and the service, but you can also play a critical role in delivering AI, to the enterprise, and that in itself is very important, not just from an AI technology point of view, but everything that AI is able to do will be dependent on the connectivity level. What's the quality of the network connectivity that's bringing about the capabilities that everyone is really talking about? So that's what we're seeing, and there's quite a lot different use cases, but we kind of see it across these four big buckets.
If I can add to that, we're actually leveraging the CDRs of the customers and looking at how many calls they've got dropped, and if they're having a poor network experience, and then proactively reaching out to incentivize the customer to stay, giving them the options of, maybe extra data, and, just trying to show that we care. So you're absolutely correct that that's like one of the most powerful tools that you can use to retain your customer and retain a loyal customer base.
If I can
sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there are some really fancy customer experience management solutions out in the market, but where do these solutions fail? They'll give you 10 tons of data, that this was a customer's experience on the internet, this was the experience on the network, this was an outage on the network. But what it's not telling the agent is this is possibly why the customer is dissatisfied. When you analyze the data and how do you correct that, it also doesn't give you a view that with how many times has a customer called, and because he's having bad experiences, what is his propensity to churn? How are you using this data to improve your ability to satisfy your customer and retain your customer? Because in certain markets where prepaid is a way of life, I think the propensity to churn becomes very high when experience is bad. And I think this is where AI can really enrich that interaction by saying, I'm not just dealing with a customer complaint, but I've also saved the customer in the way I've managed the customer.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, I agree.
I think that ability to anticipate, and this is me speaking, certainly not as an expert and not even as a journalist, but just as a consumer of telecom services. If this stuff gets anticipated, or if at the moment there's a pain point, I've got some interaction with the provider saying, don't worry, Scott, I've got this. It'll all be sorted out soon. Obviously, you don't want to be making promises and not delivering. That can lead to a sort of negative outcome. But yeah, I can see how that's really good. But I can also see, I guess that this is where I'm being a journalist. Part of my job is like to push back and be adversarial and be skeptical. And I just imagine some of the ways in which not necessarily it could go wrong, but it could be imperfect. So I guess that's a new direction I'd like to send it in for all of us, and maybe I'll start with you, Rickard. In terms of like obstacles to implementing this well, or objections from users, whether they're internal or external, or any other sort of adversarial stuff that you think you have to overcome on this journey to plug AI into everything?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's adversarial, but you're absolutely right about that. There is a hallucination problem, and I sort of would liken, the ChatGPTs of the world, and this is sort of like a border collie. Like you give them a job and they want to answer. Like they always want to do, and they find stuff, and then it's like, oh, here it is, but maybe it's wrong. So these, like the systems checking the systems is sort of a future direction, I think, for many things. That I think, for instance, Perplexity that we partner with, they do that well for general world knowledge. They always provide sources, for instance, and I think this is a way we always have to do that. And I would just like to say something as well on the in the same direction here, is that we shouldn't be afraid of people calling. Like the call deflection paradigm, I think is really old school. I think we should really embrace people calling us, but maybe they don't need to talk to a human necessarily. Like the actual call is not the problem, but you would need to get it right then. So you can't sort of like send the customer in a direction which is completely wrong. So we do a lot of work on this. Would not say it's perfect, by no means perfect, but if you have a source checking system, so it checks itself a little bit, it becomes much better.
just to add on that, I think I wouldn't call it an obstacle, but I think we have to be very mindful of people's privacy.
Exactly.
And I think that we as telcos have a long journey dealing and actually managing in an ethical and responsible way our customers' data. I think we're very well placed to play an important role there and to orchestrate different offers and different agents that our customers will be dealing from these responsible AI perspectives.
Yeah, I completely agree. It just makes me think of something. I don't know if this is directly related to what you were referring to, but have any of you ever had that experience where you're having a conversation and then you get served an ad on the thing you were talking about, and then you start to get freaked out and you're like, everything's listening to me. You know, I don't even have an Alexa device. It's probably just this. But, you know, the serious point there is, I think the point you were making, Eugenia, which is, you know, we got to treat people with respect. And these things are there to help them, but they're not there to take over their lives. They're not there to make decisions for them. And I suppose that's the really delicate thing when you're trying to anticipate needs, is if you get that wrong and you go, oh, Scott, I anticipate that you want some lunch. You don't know, I'm busy. You know, you don't want them to be too presumptuous, the AI, I guess.
No, absolutely. And given the fact that we're in a nascent stage, this has all been, you know, past 3 years of work. There's a lot that we need to learn as the custodians of the data. And going back to the privacy side of things, we can't become too personal, right?
Yeah.
For example, there are people, you know, I've heard people try to suggest solutions for spamming, processing all the customer SMS data through a data lake, and then making real-time decisions of what to pass through and what not, right? I think that's going too far, right, into the customers' lives, right? So I think there's a fine line in terms of what we should and shouldn't be looking at in terms of customer data, and then of course using that to the advantage of the customer, right? Not to the disadvantage where they start freaking out.
Yes. So perhaps go ahead. I was going to pass it to you too.
No, so I was just you know, about to add to the point around you know, privacy and accuracy. I think yes, those are all very important, and I think the fact that we're having AI regulations coming into the fore with different countries and different regions defining the way that we should deal with, you know, personal data, for example, becomes very, very important, because organizations, telcos, can then frame their own responsible AI, you know, policies, define the principles that align with, you know, international standards, and that gives them the ability to then, you know, make sure that anything that they execute or any AI system they execute align with those strategies. But it's also important not just to create the policies, but also to educate your people in terms of how to make these policies part and parcel of their day-to-day activities. And I think that is important and paramount. Just to add around accuracy problem, I think everything you will say about AI will be based on data. Okay, and the quality and extent of breadth of data that you have will define the extent of the benefits that you will get from any AI investment that you make.
Yeah.
And I think I would say that in terms of my research, it's interesting to see that operators are seeing that as being critical and being important, because I think we all started running off with the whole idea of AI systems, and, you know, that's the big shiny thing in town. I want to get the next AI tool, forgetting that AI tool will be as good as the data that you feed it, right?
And that's always been the case with even when we were talking about databases decades ago, rubbish in, rubbish out, and all that sort of thing.
Exactly. So having the right, you know, data management practices in place, having the right principles in place, making sure your people, because you can have a data management system. The data problem isn't necessarily a technology problem. It's also a people and process problem, because the people are working with the data, but also the systems are generating the data. And we've got so many systems generating data. You need to standardize the data. The AI systems need to understand the data you're presenting to it and then make sense of those data systems. So for me, I would say it's interesting to see that there are a number of discussions around that, but I think as an industry, we kind of need to move further quicker, because that will dictate the pace at which we derive benefits from AI investments.
Yeah, I think on that, I think the current transition from unstructured data and going into structured data has been a huge game changer for pretty much anybody working on any sort of AI model.
Yeah.
Because previously, if you remember the days of big data, where people were working on unstructured data and trying to make sense out of customer behavior, etc. Now you don't need that because the quality of data that the structured data is producing is enough for you to train your LLMs and etc.
I would like to think that, as you get into picking up more and more detailed data on a subscriber from the network, from their devices, you're getting more and more into the personal life of that individual.
Yeah.
And the ability to filter that data and manage that data to the point where the customer, where you are acting in a responsible way is quite key because, DPI data can give you a lot of personal information that a customer may not want a telco to see. So I think the issue of what regulation allows, your sense of responsibility, and what the customer is willing to share with you becomes quite key in terms of how you drive the process going forward.
I think that's where customer consent really comes in.
Yeah.
It needs to be the foundation of anything that we do really with AI, because once you can prove that you've got customer consent to work with their data, then that to a very large extent keeps you in a better position, so to speak, in terms of, what then comes out of that.
Although I imagine that process could be challenging in itself because being asked for consent too often can be a bit annoying. Like the way websites are now, every time you go on a new website, you've got to agree to various cookies and all that sort of thing. So and I'm not saying I have the answer, but there's obviously the opportunity to make that process as painless and streamlined as possible.
I guess at the point at which you're onboarding consent, you may want to show a list of data points you're using and what is the customer willing to consent to and what maybe they seek additional permission on. So I do believe that, I've looked at data coming out of DPI, etc., very, very private. Some of it I think customers wouldn't want a telco to use. So I think the issue of getting more granular consent starts becoming quite key in the longer term journey.
Maybe that's just a quick thought, sorry, and then I'll hand back to you. Maybe there's a place for a specific agentic AI for consent. Maybe you have maybe there's a sliding scale, like 1 to 10. Like 10, I don't care if you know everything about me. 1, stay out of my life. And then people will just sort of select their setting, and then it could be applied by the agentic AI across what? Anyway, it's just off the top of my head. So were you about to say something?
I think I have forgotten what I was about to say.
Oh, sorry.
But
My bad.
No. But I think you make a very good point there in terms of listing out, okay, what you're giving consent to. But the reality is that telco services are changing, and with change
Very
comes
dynamic,
the fact that the data that it's related to the service you're offering is also changing. So it's also thinking about how you simplify that concept. I agree, it's very, in fact, sometimes most people don't even have to bother reading, and just, okay, yes, I just want to get straight to what it is, but not realizing that click is given access to so many things that you probably would have wanted to keep very close to yourself. So I think it's just thinking of how you simplify that consent generation process.
Yeah, but we also need to understand that as 5G matures and these services become more proliferated, you're going to have a much deeper level of data coming through, from the network as well. So I think that the body of data, the volume of data is going to grow. And I think at the end of the day, if a customer gave you consent 5 years ago, the data you used 5 years ago and the data you're using today may be completely different. So I think seeking consent every time there are major changes in the data that you're using, I think becomes quite key. Only then will you win the trust of the customer, because I think at the end of the day you can have regulations, you can say you act in a responsible way, but what if the customer comfortable with? And that I think is the real issue.
Okay, the time's flown by. We've been chatting for a while, so we're running out of time. I think I got one more short one. I might start at the end with Eugenia and just move it back here. We've covered quite a lot, but I'm just thinking in terms of both maybe new products or services, or just some way of demonstrating ROI on AI investments. Do you have any thoughts on that? How when you're talking to your colleagues and you're explaining why it's worth doing all this, how you demonstrate it?
We spent quite some time actually aligning just not only on the strategic vision for AI and the guiding principles of that, of course, responsible AI being one of them, but also what were the objectives, right? And I think, of course, we have talked a lot about efficiency, both on the OPEX and the CAPEX side, on the autonomy of the network, on the engagement with the customer and new revenue streams that could come from this. And I think for us it's important for every new use case to really try to understand what are the levers it's touching and where the benefit would come from. And benefit both, we were talking about the call center, for example, right? So it's not just about making it more productive and then thus reducing cost, but I think in each call, if we actually manage to reduce the average handling time of the call, we need to think about how these will affect the customer and the customer experience, and thus potentially increase NPS, reduce churn. With the models that we're seeing now in terms of hyper-personalization and taking the NBA and NBO to the next level, I think we should be seeing not only reduced churn, but also increasing ARPU potentially from cross-sell and upsell. So I think it's important to really identify what are these levers, what are these KPIs that we target in each of the use cases.
And from a vendor point of view?
Yeah, I think it's very important. You know, you cannot sell a platform to an operator without being able to demonstrate use cases and the ROI on those use cases, right? So the ability to demonstrate that becomes very important, because, you know, there are operators who are very clear that, you know, we don't just want a platform. We want to see how that platform is monetized. What are the use cases? How do I benefit from that? So I think from a vendor perspective, there's a bigger and bigger responsibility in showing that how do you use a platform to drive an improvement in the telco space, whether it's revenue, whether it's customer experience, whether it's cost optimization, whether it's CapEx kind of improvement, or, you know, better directing your CapEx investments. So I think at the end of the day, as vendors, we have to ensure that, you know, the use cases we're presenting that can be driven through the AI platforms are the ones that Telco One can use and can get benefit from.
Okay. Sure. And the analyst perspective?
Yeah, if I may add, I think I mentioned, you know, we've been collecting lots and lots of data on how on use cases operators are implementing. And when we look, you know, because we're also tracking what kind of benefits they're getting out of it, most of what you'll see is improved time, reduced time to detect a problem, or reduced time to recommend, reduced time to resolve an issue and things like that, or improved employee productivity. I think that's been the biggest, improving employee productivity, which you can map back to saving time, reducing the time it takes to resolve a problem. But then the question you ask yourself is, how do these benefits map back to the biggest questions or biggest challenge that operators want to address: revenue growth and reducing cost? You know, so it's about, you know, being able to map this cost and time savings and cost savings back to revenues. That, okay, I've been able to achieve 30% reduction in the time it takes me to resolve a problem, and as a result, I've been able to retain, you know, I've been able to increase my customer retention rate, which in the long run has translated to, you know, increase in revenue growth. Because at the end of the day, that is a more convincing story to tell. All right, I'm not saying the other stories are not convincing enough, but as long as it shows that there is improvement in my revenue growth, then it's probably a good sell, the more effective sell.
So monetization aside, because that's been talked about already, for us, we benchmark ourselves. Anything that we do, especially in this space of AI right now, is looking at our NPS and what sort of an impact has it had, whatever initiative we've implemented, on the NPS itself. So for us, it's more about making mobile better with the advent of AI and hyper-personalization.
Okay, and finally with you, Rico.
Yeah, so I'm much more working on the revenue growth side, so I'm responsible for consumer-facing things. I was responsible for the cost side on the customer service before, so I sympathize with that, but now I'm on the growth side, and I think that we can provide an aggregation position here. That's what I believe, similar to that what we did in TV, where we can add maybe 10, 20 euros of ARPU on top of existing customers. And I think like monthly, and I think this is really where we are. We already have proof points here that we have saved nearly 85 million euros for our customers, so provided that value already in just a few months. And we can add this on top of existing plans, etc. I know this will work, because the business model from the AI companies are getting more flexible. Cost base is going down, so they have some more flexibility. Very, very similar to what happened in the streaming side some years ago, where we had all of the streaming, we wanted to own everything, but then we realized it's better to aggregate the Disneys and Netflix and all these. We can position ourselves in exactly the same way, adding 10, 20, 30 euros of monthly ARPU to our customers and still providing maybe value of 60 euros on top of that, so that we give them savings as well.
Okay, that's brilliant. And that last one's sort of food for thought in the sort of broader context of conversations we have every year at Mobile World Congress, and I'm sure the rest of the time, of course, about how the best ways for operators to expand their business, to increase ARPU, to lower overheads, and all that sort of thing. And your point about playing to your strengths is spot on. And maybe AI and agentic AI will make it even more efficient for operators to play to their strengths, identify what they can uniquely offer, and then do that really well. So yeah, okay. Well, I better wrap it up there. That was fascinating. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
It was a really interesting conversation, and thanks especially to Technotree for organising this. And I hope everyone who's watching or listening enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.